The Broken Avirix. The marketplace on Station Nexus buzzed with the usual chaos of 100 different species haggling, trading, and conducting business. Holographic advertisements flickered in languages that would take a universal translator several seconds to decode. The air recyclers worked overtime to handle the mix of atmospheric preferences, creating strange currents that carried scents ranging from pleasant to nauseating. Kira Eth hunched over her small stall, her magnificent wings folded tight against her back. Once, those wings had been the pride of the Avirix people, spanning nearly 4 meters when fully extended, covered in iridescent feathers that shifted from deep blue to silver depending on the light. Now, the left wing hung at an awkward angle, several primary flight feathers missing, and a visible tremor ran through the membrane where shrapnel had torn through during the war. She carefully arranged her wares on the worn metal surface. First, she placed her grandmother's singing crystal, a translucent gem that hummed with ancient melodies when touched. The crystal alone was worth enough to buy passage to 3 different systems. Next came her ceremonial flight armor, crafted from rare metals found only in the floating cities of her homeworld. The breastplate bore intricate engravings telling the story of her family's lineage, stretching back 12 generations. A Zeltharian merchant approached, his 4 arms examining the items with practiced efficiency. His compound eyes reflected the marketplace's neon lights as he picked up the singing crystal. "Beautiful piece," he said, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into standard galactic. "But the market for Avirix artifacts isn't what it used to be. I can offer 1,500 credits. Kira F's heart sank. The healing treatments she needed would cost at least 20,000 credits. She had researched every medical facility within 50 parsecs, and that was the minimum price for wing reconstruction surgery. "This crystal has been in my family for 300 years, she said, trying to keep the desperation from her voice. "It's a genuine songstone, not one of those synthetic copies." The Zeltharian's mandibles clicked in what might have been sympathy. "I understand its value to you, but sentiment doesn't affect market prices. 1,500 is generous." As the day wore on, more traders came and went. A Corvan antiquities dealer offered 800 for her flight armor. A Thexian collector barely glanced at her father's navigation tools before walking away. Each rejection felt like another weight pressing down on her already damaged wing. The sun simulation overhead began its slow transition to evening mode when a human approached her stall. Kira Eth had seen humans before, of course, but mostly from a distance. They were still relatively new to the galactic community, having joined only 50 years ago. This one was tall by human standards, with graying hair and kind eyes that seemed to take in everything without judgment. "Mind if I take a look?" he asked in accented galactic, gesturing toward her items. Kira Eth nodded, too tired to manage more than basic politeness. She had been standing for nearly 10 hours, and her injured wing ached terribly. The human examined each item with surprising care, occasionally asking questions about their origin or significance. "This navigation compass," he said, holding up an ornate device covered in astronomical symbols. "It's pre-war Avirix, isn't it? From before your people had to relocate?" The question caught her off guard. Most beings knew little about Avirix history beyond the basic facts. "Yes," she said. "My father used it when he was a cloud rider, before the Devourers came." The human nodded thoughtfully. "The Devourers destroyed most of your floating cities. I read about it in the war archives. Your people fought bravely, even after your homeworld's atmosphere became toxic." Something in his tone made Kira Eth look at him more carefully. There was genuine respect in his voice, not the casual pity she usually heard when beings mentioned the war. "Are you interested in buying something?" she asked. "Maybe," he said. "But first, can I ask why you're selling these? They seem like family heirlooms." Kira Eth hesitated. She had told the story so many times that day that it felt worn out, like a recording played too often. But something about this human made her want to answer honestly. "I need credits for medical treatment," she said, unconsciously adjusting her damaged wing. "For surgery." The human's eyes followed the movement, and she saw understanding dawn in his expression. "Wing reconstruction? You know about it?" "I know enough," he said quietly. "I also know it's expensive. More than these items would bring even at fair market value." Kiraeth felt tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. The human was quiet for a long moment, studying her face rather than her wares. "What's your name?" he asked finally. "Kiraeth, daughter of Mortal, of the Cloudborn clan." "I'm Marcus Webb, and I think we need to have a longer conversation." He glanced around the busy marketplace. "Somewhere quieter. There's a cafe on level 7 that serves decent synthetic coffee and real fruit juices from Earth. Would you join me?" Kiraeth found herself nodding, though she wasn't sure why. Marcus helped her pack up her items, handling each one with the same care she would show. As they walked toward the lift tubes, she noticed that he matched his pace to hers, somehow sensing that her injured wing affected her balance. The cafe was indeed quieter, with soft lighting and the gentle sound of human jazz music playing in the background. Marcus ordered coffee for himself, and after asking about her dietary needs, fruit juice for her. They settled into a corner booth where she could position her wing comfortably. "So," Marcus said after their drinks arrived, "tell me about yourself, not just the medical situation, but who you are." It was such an unusual question that Kiraeth found herself actually thinking about it. When had anyone last asked her that? "I was a navigator," she said finally. "On cargo ships mostly, but sometimes passenger vessels. I was good at it. My people have an instinctive understanding of three-dimensional space that most species lack. It comes from evolving in a world of floating cities." "Was?" "The injury affects my spatial perception. Sometimes I get dizzy, lose my sense of direction. No shipping company will hire a navigator who might get confused during a hyperspace jump." Marcus nodded. "So you've been trying to scrape together enough money for surgery by selling your family's treasures." "It's the only way," Kiraeth said, surprised by how defensive she sounded. "The Avirix government provides basic medical care, but cosmetic surgery isn't covered." "Cosmetic?" Marcus's eyebrows rose. "Your wing reconstruction is cosmetic?" "According to the bureaucrats, yes. I can walk, I can use my hands, I can breathe. The wing isn't necessary for basic survival. But it's necessary for who you are." The simple statement hit her like a physical blow. She stared at him, unable to speak for a moment. "Nobody else has ever said that," she whispered. "Then nobody else has been paying attention." Marcus leaned forward. "Kiraeth, I want to make you an offer. But first, I need you to know that I'm not some wealthy philanthropist looking for good deeds to make myself feel better. I'm a freelance trader, and I make my living finding valuable things that others have overlooked." "What kind of offer?" "I'll pay for your surgery." Kiraeth's heart leaped, then crashed back down. "I can't afford to pay you back. Even if I get my wings fixed and find work again, it would take years." "I'm not asking you to pay me back with credits," Marcus said. "I'm asking you to work with me." "Doing what?" Marcus smiled. "What you were born to do. Navigate. I've got a ship and a theory about some very valuable salvage in a region of space that most people consider impossible to chart. The gravitational fields are too complex, the stellar radiation plays havoc with instruments, and the hyperspace routes shift constantly. But I think someone with Avirix spatial instincts might be able to find a way through." "Even with my injury?" "Especially with your injury," Marcus said, confusing her completely. "But we'll talk about that after you're healed. First things first, let's get you to a proper medical facility." Kiraeth stared at him, afraid to believe what she was hearing. "Why would you do this? You don't know me. For all you know, I'm a terrible navigator, or dishonest, or maybe, Marcus interrupted gently, I recognize someone whose true worth has been overlooked by everyone else. He raised his coffee cup in a small toast. Here's to seeing things differently. As they sat in the quiet cafe, discussing medical facilities and treatment options, Kiraheth felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. She didn't understand this strange human's motivations, but for the first time since her injury, someone was looking at her and seeing not a broken creature to be pitied, but a person with value. Outside the cafe's windows, the station's artificial night cycle painted the marketplace in softer colors. Tomorrow, she would pack up her stall for the last time. Tomorrow, she would begin the journey toward healing. And maybe, just maybe, she would discover that her true worth had never been measured in the things she owned, but in the unique gifts she had always carried within herself. Marcus was right about one thing. She had been overlooked by everyone else. But now, as she watched him make calls to medical contacts and research facilities, she realized that sometimes it only took one person seeing clearly to change everything. The healing and the discovery. 3 months after that conversation in the cafe, Kiraheth stood in the recovery room of the Meridian Medical Center, stretching her wings for the first time since the war. The sensation was indescribable, like rediscovering a lost sense. Her left wing, now fully reconstructed with biosynthetic materials that integrated seamlessly with her natural tissue, responded perfectly to her mental commands. Dr. Yeneth, a Corvan specialist who had performed the surgery, watched with satisfaction as Kiraheth experimentally flapped her wings. The movement sent a gentle breeze through the room, rustling the doctor's lab coat. The integration is perfect, Dr. Yeneth said, making notes on her holographic pad. The artificial flight membranes should be indistinguishable from your natural ones within another month. Full flight capability should return within 6 weeks. Kiraheth folded her wings carefully against her back, marveling at how natural the movement felt. Dr. Yeneth, I have to ask, this level of reconstruction, with biosynthetic materials this advanced, the cost must have been enormous. The doctor's mandibles clicked in what Kiraheth had learned was amusement. Your human friend has very deep pockets and very specific requirements. He insisted on the best possible materials and techniques, regardless of cost. He also left detailed instructions about your post-operative care. What kind of instructions? Physical therapy focused not just on wing strength, but on spatial awareness exercises. Quite unusual for standard wing reconstruction, but Mr. Webb seemed to know exactly what he was requesting. As if summoned by the mention of his name, Marcus appeared in the doorway. He had visited every day during her recovery, bringing books, news from the station, and increasingly intriguing stories about his work as a trader. How are we feeling? He asked, his eyes immediately going to her wings. Like I could fly to the next system? Kiraheth said, then laughed at his alarmed expression. I'm joking. Dr. Yeneth says 6 weeks before I'm cleared for flight. Good, Marcus said, visibly relaxed. Because I've got something to show you that might help with your recovery. He led her to the medical center's observation deck, where she could see his ship for the first time. The vessel was nothing like the massive cargo haulers she had navigated before. It was sleek and compact, designed for speed and maneuverability rather than bulk transport. But what caught her attention were the modifications, additional sensor arrays, specialized navigation equipment, and what looked like a custom astrogation chamber. She's called the Pioneer's Edge, Marcus said. I've spent the last 5 years modifying her for deep space exploration. The navigation chamber is equipped with holographic projection systems that can create 3-dimensional star maps in real time. It's beautiful, Kiraheth said, meaning it. But why show me this now? Marcus was quiet for a moment, watching ships come and go from the station's docking bays. Because I want you to understand what you're agreeing to. This isn't just a job, Kira. It's a partnership, and partnerships require trust on both sides. Over the following weeks, as Kira continued her recovery, Marcus began sharing details about their planned expedition. The target was a region called the Maelstrom Nebula, where a Forerunner installation was believed to be hidden. The Forerunners were an ancient species that had vanished millions of years ago, leaving behind artifacts that contained technologies far beyond anything the current galactic civilizations could produce. 3 different exploration teams have tried to map the nebula, Marcus explained, as they sat in the ship's navigation chamber. All of them failed. The gravitational fields are created by a cluster of neutron stars, and they're constantly shifting. Traditional navigation is impossible. But you think a Viric's instincts might work differently? I think your people evolved in 3-dimensional space in a way that no other known species did. Your floating cities weren't just built in the air. They moved, constantly adjusting to wind patterns and atmospheric pressures. Your ancestors developed spatial awareness that goes beyond what instruments can measure. Kira studied the preliminary maps of the nebula, noting the swirling patterns of gravitational distortion. It does look familiar, she admitted. Like the storm systems back home, the ones that would move between the city clusters. That's what I hoped you'd say. The day finally came when Dr. War cleared Kira for active duty. Her first real test was a short flight around the station's outer hull, wearing a safety suit in case her wings failed. As she launched herself into space, feeling the subtle currents of solar wind and gravitational fields, Kira understood what Marcus had meant about seeing things differently. Her spatial perception wasn't just healed, it was enhanced. The biosynthetic materials in her wing responded to gravitational fields in ways her natural wing never had. She could feel the pull of the station's artificial gravity, the influence of the nearby star, even the passage of ships through hyperspace. It was like gaining a new sense. When she returned to the ship, Marcus was waiting with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Well?" he asked. "It's incredible," she said, still breathless from the flight. "I can sense gravitational fields directly now. The synthetic materials must be more sensitive than natural tissue." That's what Dr. Yeneth thought might happen. The biosynthetic materials were originally developed for deep space exploration suits. They're designed to detect and respond to subtle environmental changes. Kira stared at him. "You knew this would happen. You planned it." "I hoped it would happen," Marcus corrected. "When I researched your injury, I learned that the shrapnel that damaged your wing was infused with exotic matter from a devourer weapon. That exotic matter created interference patterns that disrupted your spatial perception. So the surgery wasn't just about fixing my wing. The surgery removed the exotic matter and replaced the damaged tissue with materials that could enhance your natural abilities instead of interfering with them. You're not just healed, Kirath. You're better than you were before." The implications hit her slowly. "This is why you made the offer. Not charity, but because you needed someone with these specific abilities." "Partially," Marcus admitted, "but also because I could see that you were valuable in ways that everyone else was missing, including yourself." Their first test flight took them to a small asteroid field where gravitational anomalies made navigation tricky for most pilots. Kira found herself moving through the 3-dimensional space with an intuitive understanding that amazed even her. She could feel the subtle pulls and pushes of gravity, predict the movement patterns of the asteroids, and chart courses that seemed impossible to the ship's computer. "How are you doing that?" Marcus asked as she guided them through a particularly dense cluster. "I don't know," Kira said honestly. "It's like I can feel the shape of space itself, the way gravity bends around mass, the currents and eddies it creates. It's similar to how my people read wind patterns, but more complex." "Can you teach the computer to follow your routes?" "Maybe. but it would require new programming, algorithms that account for spatial intuition rather than just mathematical calculations. As they returned to the station, Marcus was already making plans. "We'll need supplies for a 3-month expedition, backup navigation systems in case the main computers fail, and diplomatic clearances for unexplored space." "Marcus," Kira said as they docked, "why didn't you tell me all this from the beginning?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Because I needed you to make the choice for the right reasons. If I had offered you enhanced abilities and a chance at treasure, you might have agreed out of desperation. But I wanted you to understand your own worth first." That night, as Kira flew practice patterns around the station, she thought about worth and value. In the marketplace, beings had looked at her possessions and seen only their monetary value. Even she had begun to think of herself only in terms of what she could sell or trade. But Marcus had seen something different, not what she owned, but what she could become. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had been willing to trade away everything she owned to heal her broken wings, never realizing that her true value lay not in her possessions, but in the unique way she experienced the universe around her. The injury that had seemed like the end of everything had actually been the beginning of something entirely new. As she prepared for their expedition into the Maelstrom Nebula, Kira found herself looking forward to the challenge. For the first time in months, she felt like herself again, not a broken creature selling her heritage, but an Avirix navigator ready to explore the unknown depths of space. The human who had seen her true worth had given her more than healing. He had given her back her purpose, and shown her that sometimes the most valuable things couldn't be measured in credits or traded in marketplaces. They could only be recognized by someone who understood that a person's worth wasn't determined by what they owned, but by what they could uniquely contribute to the universe. The Maelstrom's secret. The Maelstrom Nebula hung before them like a cosmic storm frozen in time. Swirling clouds of ionized gas painted the darkness in shades of purple and gold, while the gravitational chaos at its heart bent space itself into impossible geometries. 3 neutron stars danced their ancient dance somewhere within that luminous maze, their combined gravity creating a region that had defeated every previous expedition. "Sensors are already showing interference," Marcus reported from the pilot's seat. "We're still 2 light hours from the outer edge, and the gravitational readings are fluctuating beyond normal parameters." Kira stood in the center of the navigation chamber, surrounded by holographic displays that showed the nebula from every conceivable angle. The ship's computers had assembled this composite image from decades of long-range observations, but she knew that once they entered the nebula, these maps would become worthless. The gravitational fields shifted too rapidly for any external observation to track. "The computer models can't predict the movement patterns," she said, studying the data streams. "But there's a rhythm to it. Look at the way the gas clouds spiral. It's not random." Marcus joined her in the chamber, watching as she manipulated the holographic display. "You see a pattern? My people call it sky dancing," Kira explained. "When multiple storm systems interact in our homeworld's atmosphere, they create complex patterns that look chaotic but follow deeper rules. This is similar, but 3-dimensional. She spread her wings slightly, letting her enhanced senses feel the subtle gravitational currents that reached even this far from the nebula's heart. The biosynthetic materials in her reconstructed wing tingled with sensitivity to forces that the ship's instruments could barely detect. "I think I can navigate it," she said. "But not with the standard approach. We'll need to move like a cloud dancer, following the gravitational currents rather than fighting them." "How long will it take?" "Days, maybe weeks. And Marcus," she turned to face him. "Once we're inside, There won't be any way to predict our path from outside. We'll be committed until we reach the center or until I lose the trail. Marcus nodded seriously. I trust your judgment. And Kira Eth? Whatever we find in there, whatever happens, this expedition has already been worth it. You've shown abilities that no one else in the galaxy possesses. They entered the nebula at what Kira Eth identified as an optimal point, where the gravitational currents formed a relatively stable inward spiral. Almost immediately, the ship's instruments began registering readings that made no sense according to standard physics. Space itself seemed to flow like liquid, carrying them deeper into the maze. Kira Eth found herself in a state she had never experienced before. Her consciousness seemed to expand beyond her physical form. Following the movements of matter and energy through dimensions her mind could sense but not fully comprehend. She navigated by instinct and feeling, calling out course corrections that Marcus followed without question. The gravitational fields are getting stronger, he reported after their third day in the nebula. But somehow more stable, too. We're approaching the center, Kira Eth said. The 3 neutron stars have locked into a stable configuration. That's why this whole system exists. It's not natural chaos. It's artificial order. Artificial? Someone or something arranged those neutron stars deliberately. The Forerunners built this whole region as a navigation puzzle, designed to keep out anyone who couldn't think in true 3-dimensional terms. On the 5th day, they broke through the final barrier of ionized gas and found themselves in a pocket of clear space surrounding the neutron star triad. And there, hanging motionless in the center of the gravitational maelstrom, was a structure that took both their breaths away. The Forerunner installation was vast beyond comprehension, a crystalline lattice that seemed to grow from space itself. It pulsed with internal light, and Kira Eth could feel its influence on the gravitational fields around them. This was the source of the stable configuration. The artifact was somehow using the neutron stars as components in an incredibly complex machine. It's a navigation beacon, Kira Eth whispered in amazement. But not for ships, for something much bigger. As they approached the installation, it responded to their presence. Holographic displays activated throughout the structure, showing star charts that covered not just their local galaxy, but the entire visible universe. And threading through those charts were pathways, routes through space that connected distant galaxies through methods that current science couldn't begin to explain. They were mapping the universe, Marcus said in wonder. The Forerunners were charting paths between galaxies. More than that, Kira Eth said, her enhanced perception allowing her to read the gravitational signatures embedded in the displays. They were building a network. Look at these resonance patterns. Each installation like this one serves as a node in a vast communication and transportation grid. The installation's central chamber contained what appeared to be a master control system, with interfaces designed for beings who understood space in ways similar to the Avirics. As Kira Eth approached the controls, they activated automatically, recognizing her spatial awareness as compatible with their requirements. Suddenly, knowledge flooded her mind. Not through any technological interface, but through direct gravitational manipulation of her biosynthetic wing tissues. She saw the network as the Forerunners had built it, connecting thousands of galaxies across distances that light would take billions of years to cross. She understood that this particular installation was a way station, one of many scattered throughout their home galaxy. But she also learned something darker. The network was incomplete, abandoned when the Forerunners discovered that using it came with a terrible price. Each activation drew the attention of entities from spaces beyond normal reality, beings that existed in the gravitational dimensions between galaxies and viewed any intrusion into their domain as an attack to be eliminated. "We need to leave," Kira Eth said urgently. "Now." "What? Why? This is the greatest archaeological discovery in galactic history." Because activating the beacon to understand it has sent a signal, the same signal that marked the forerunners for extinction. She was already moving toward the ship, her wings spread to catch the subtle gravitational currents. The entities that destroyed them are coming. They barely made it back to the Pioneer's edge before space itself began to ripple around the installation. Things that hurt to look at directly began emerging from dimensions that had no names in any known language. The Forerunner beacon flared with desperate energy, trying to establish defensive protocols that had failed 65 million years ago. Kiraeth guided their ship through the collapsing gravitational maze as reality warped around them. Her enhanced perception was the only thing that allowed her to find a path through the chaos as the ancient machine fought its final battle against entities from beyond space. They escaped the nebula just as it collapsed in on itself, the Forerunner installation's destruction creating a gravitational shockwave that would be detectable across half the galaxy. But they had escaped with something more valuable than any artifact, knowledge that would reshape galactic civilization's understanding of the universe. Months later, as they sat in the same cafe on Station Nexus where their partnership had begun, Kiraeth reflected on the journey that had brought them here. Her family's possessions, the ones she had been so desperate to sell, now sat safely in her quarters, returned to her by Marcus as soon as they had completed their expedition. "I never asked," she said. "Where did you get the money for my surgery? You said you weren't wealthy." Marcus smiled. "I sold my own family heirlooms. My grandfather's war medals, my grandmother's jewelry, some rare books that had been in the family for generations." Kiraeth stared at him. "You did the same thing I was trying to do." "Exactly. But the difference was, I had a plan for getting value back. I invested in you, and that investment has paid off beyond anything I could have imagined." The knowledge they had gained from the Forerunner installation had indeed proven valuable. Governments and research institutions across the galaxy were bidding enormous sums for access to their findings. More importantly, they had established themselves as the preeminent team for navigating gravitational anomalies and exploring regions of space that were impossible for conventional ships. "You know what the real treasure was?" Kiraeth said, watching ships arrive and depart from the station's docking bays. "Not the Forerunner technology or the credits we're earning from it." "What then?" "Learning that worth isn't about what you own. It's about what you can do, what you can become. And who believes in your potential even when you don't believe in it yourself." Marcus raised his coffee cup in another toast. "To seeing clearly." "To being seen clearly," Kiraeth corrected. As they sat in comfortable silence, Kiraeth thought about all the traders who had dismissed her possessions as worthless, all the beings who had seen only a broken Avirix trying to scrape together enough credits for medical treatment. They had looked at her situation and seen desperation, disability, worthlessness. Only one human had looked at the same situation and seen possibility. In the end, she had tried to trade away everything she owned to heal her broken wings. But Marcus had seen that her true worth was never in her possessions. It was in her unique abilities, her potential, and her determination to overcome any obstacle. He had realized that investing in her capabilities would yield returns far greater than any treasure hunt or trading venture. The marketplace outside continued its eternal bustle of buying and selling, beings exchanging goods for credits in the endless cycle of commerce. But somewhere in that chaos, Kiraeth hoped another broken soul might find someone who could see past their immediate circumstances to recognize their true value. Because sometimes the most precious things in the universe weren't the ones you could buy or sell. They were the ones you could only recognize when someone believed in you enough to help you discover what you were truly capable of becoming.